And now I will switch to English because the next presentation will be in English. It's about the impact of smell in museums toward the descriptive and evaluative model for olfactory tours in museums. And I give a warm welcome to Leemans and Sofia Ehrich. They are part of the Odor Europa project. It's a new European research project on olfactory heritage and sensory mining, and I think we will hear even more about it. I would like to quickly present you, and as I hear that you are going to present a film afterwards, I would like to then open shortly your camera and maybe say just a sentence, just welcoming sentence. So I start with Inga Leemans. She's a professor for cultural history at Vrije Universiteit Amsterdam. And among many, many other tasks, she's the coordinator of Access, which is Amsterdam's Center for Cross-Disciplinary Emotions and Sensory Studies. And she has a very long-lasting, standing interest with the history of smell, with olfactory heritage and sensory mining. Inga, would you like to say a few words?
Yes, thank you so very much. And thank you all for inviting us to this wonderful conference. I've learned a lot yesterday. And I'd be happy to present today with Sofia Ehrich, one of my colleagues from the Odor Europa project and our event coordinator. En indeed, ja, Entschuldigung, dass wir in Englisch reden. Dus, ja, dat is zeer toll zijn. En de vragen ook am Englisch stellen kunnen. En when dat niet geht, then yeah, then we'll make something out of it. But indeed, we tape the film, so I presume that you will present that?
Well, thank you very much, Inga. And I would like to also introduce Sofia Ehrich. Okay. You have already done this. Hello, Sofia. Good to see you too. You are, as Inga said, the olfactory event and exhibition coordinator at the Odor Europa project. And as far as I understand, you not only hold a bachelor degree in art history from the University of California in Los Angeles, but you also have a recently earned master's degree in comparative arts and media studies from Vrije Universiteit Amsterdam. Congratulations. And yes, we are very, very happy, Inga and Sofia. We are now very keen on, watching the film.
Welcome, everyone. My name is Inge Leemans. I'm presenting the presentation, The Impact of Smell in Museums Towards a Descriptive and Evaluative Model for Olfactory Museum Tours. And I'm presenting for a whole group of people, Sofia Ehrich, Cecilia Ben-Bieber, Karen Verbeek and Lizzie Marks, who helped to develop this talk and also the whole of the Odor Europa project behind it. Over the last decades, museums have been experimenting with multisensory methodologies to engage their audiences. Visitors are invited to touch objects, to taste historical foodstuffs, and smell olfactory interpretations of artworks. In line with the Heritage Institutes, academic scholars also started to become interested in the sensorium and in the workings of the so-called lower senses. New dynamics areas of research have been developed, such as sensory studies and sensory museology. In these domains, professionals and scholars collaborate in the rehabilitation of the senses as a way to make museum experiences more engaging and also as an instrument of embodied knowledge. While smell has had a somewhat slower path, you might say, into the museums. So, for instance, in 2014, it was still described as the forgotten sense in the multi-sensory museum volume. But smell certainly is gaining attention. Museums all over the world have started to curate exhibitions with olfactory artists, inviting perfumers to create olfactory interpretations for their artworks, and also to offer olfactory tours through their collections. However, although the incorporation of smell in museums is gaining momentum, there are also a lot of questions and concerns in heritage institutes. So, for instance, on how to do this, what are the challenges, but also what are the threats of working with smells in museums? Now, these concerns, we think, are grounded in our current lack of descriptive and evaluative scholarship. So many scented exhibitions go undocumented, alas. The developed scents are not stored for future reference. Curatorial choices are not recorded. And also we lack evaluative methodologies, which can help to compare the different techniques for scent creation and distribution in galleries and museums. And finally, although the expected impact of the olfactory strategies is actually quite high, it is hardly ever tested, or if it is tested, then mostly in laboratory settings and not in the museums themselves. So this is actually one of the goals of the Ode Europa project, a European research project that I am leading at this moment, and that started last year to investigate olfactory heritage by the development of sensory mining techniques. And it's quite a large project with 7 different partners, both academic partners, but also heritage institutes, perfume industry, creative industries. So a whole wide array, you might say, of different expertises that are now busy to develop state-of-the-art artificial intelligence techniques to actually make the most of all the digital collections that we have. Think about museum collections, library and archives that have digitized their collections and that sort of host a wealth of data about our olfactory heritage, about the images of smell in history, the thinking about smell, the practices around smell, the olfactory narratives. And what the Ode Europa project aims to do is to capture all that information and to create it into storylines that we can all comprehend and that you then all can tap into. So if you are a museum, for instance, and you're interested in what is the history behind this smell, or what are the olfactory qualities of the paintings that I have in my collection, then actually in a couple of years we should have better resources to provide you with that knowledge. Now, our goal in the end is to show that critically engaging our sense of smell and olfactory heritage is actually a viable means for connecting and promoting the tangible and intangible cultural heritage of Europe. So that's quite an ambitious goal, and we have different ways that we want to reach that goal, and I'd be happy to tell a bit more about these strategies today. And in doing so, I will also cover some of the work that is done in one of the pilot projects, you might say, of Ode Europa. It was called In Search of Scents Lost, or Lost Scents, with Karel Verbeek as the main researcher, and it was a collaboration amongst others between the Rijksmuseum Amsterdam and IFF International Flavors and Fragrances. And I'll tell more about that later on. Now, what is it that we aim to do in these kinds of products that we do? So we're together with heritage institutes, with museums, libraries and archives, we are researching, in the first year we actually just sat down and talked about what are the best practices around working with scents in museums, what are the concerns, and what are the opportunities that everyone sees, and what are the lack of information that is inherent in the sector at this moment. So actually, where can we help in a way? We did that through 2 workshops, both online, alas, because we envisioned no-zone workshops, but it turned out online workshops with scent kits that we send around, which in the end actually might have been an interesting innovation to our palette, because it might be an olfactory strategy that heritage institutes can employ also in the future. So this is what we call a process of co-creation. I worked with surveys, with interviews and questionnaires to capture what it is that museums want to do but cannot do through a lack of knowledge. And then in our next step, which also started last year and will run through this year, we're actually researching different strands. Okay, where is lack of knowledge? How can we help to create more documentation, for instance, around heritage sense? How can we know more about the olfactory storytelling techniques that are available? And how can we evaluate what is done when you actually bring smell in museums? And this is where we are now. We're researching this by actually doing it. So we're hosting different olfactory events, and I'll tell a bit more about that later. But first, maybe, where do we want to go to at the end of 2023? We should have a toolkit available for everyone, both in a printed form, we now think, and in a web, an online environment. The toolkit is now called Olfactory Storytelling for GLAMS, but we might think of a better title for it. In the end, it is a toolkit that is meant to help heritage institutes work with multisensory approaches. And that goes from the whole line as to actually where to find interesting information about olfaction in connection to my collections, to how to teach or how to work with my group on developing those kinds of techniques, because curators might have a completely different intake here than the technical staff, or than the communication group, or for the digital collection specialists, for instance. So we're also thinking about the different groups in the Heritage Institutes who are connected to this. And then also we want to show, and not only so, we want to develop different kind of templates and help, but also prove further reading and also views of best practices. So if you are interested in this project, and if you want to help us, either by co-creation or by participating in an interview or bringing in needs and wants, then please contact us, because we can better do this together, I think. So that's the end. Where we are now is indeed making different kinds of steps in the process of olfactory storytelling. And that step probably first starts with the development of sense. And there we already bump into a sort of a lack of both knowledge, but also shared vocabularies. What is it actually that we're talking about if we talk about sense in the context of heritage institutes? What kind of choices do we have? Now, we've worked up to now with different denominators, you might say, different strategies for scent development. And this is a process that we've been developing over the years, for instance, indeed with international flavors and fragrances. And we've developed historically informed scents. So think about scents that are based on historical recipes, like the scent of a pomander, for instance. We've developed scents that are one singular odorant. So think about the scent of myrrh that you can smell when you stand in front of a painting of the anointment or the anointment, the three magi and the three kings offering myrrh, frankincense, and gold to the baby Jesus, or scents that are developed by perfumers which try to capture either a time period or a smellscape. For instance, we developed the scent of the Battle of Waterloo, which both sort of works with things that you do see and things that you don't see at the same time. Then a second layer might be more artistic creations. So one of the perfumers of IFF developed a scent for the Night Watch, which the Rembrandt's Nachtwacht, which thought about more of synesthetic qualities. And the third line might also be real sort of scent reconstructions, working with more chemical approaches in order to recreate smells from materiality. So think about residues in perfume bottles, for instance. And often what we have are combinations of these different kinds of strategies. So it's very hard to land this. And at this moment, we're developing a perfumer brief in order to capture and help Heritage Institute on how to work with scent developers in creating scents for their museums. We're doing this, for instance, at this moment with the Museum Ulm in Germany. And in April, we are happy to announce that in April, this event will open, and it will be olfactory tours through the museum. Follow Your Nose, a guided tour with smells. So I gladly invite you to come to Ulm in the coming months. After April, the tour will be part of the general exhibition. And taking the tour, you are guided through different artworks, both early modern and modern. And then you're offered different kinds of smell. Now, in that development, together with the Museum Ulm, we selected 8 artworks and created 10 scents to go with that. Sofia Ehrich, who is also here in the room, can tell you much more about the designing process and why we chose these artworks to go. That's actually one of the things that we're learning, how to fine-tune olfactory storytelling for a guided tour. You have to balance, of course, the sorts of stories that you want to tell, but also to think about the timing and pacing of the scents. Now, that might be important to realize that an olfactory guided tour, of course, is not your average guided tour. That it's really important to think about what it is that you're doing by bringing smell into the game. What is the narrative that you want, or what are the narratives that you want to highlight? What is the extra that you want to bring? Think about the timing and pacing, and do not overload customers with too many smells, and think about whether, if you are working with malodors, so bad smells or challenging smells in your tour, how then do you balance them with the fragrant ones? And certainly do avoid nose fatigue. So mostly we work with indeed 8 or 10 smells, and then that's mainly that's sort of the maximum of what people can take in. You can also teach them how to neutralize their smelling, for instance, by smelling their own skin, in order to be able to take in yet another smell. So those are techniques that we're learning at this moment, and again we can give you more detailed descriptions. These are the sort of points that we're now documenting for future tour development. Also the process, so for instance, we are trying out and evaluating different ways of presenting smell in the tours, and also we've been experimenting with different techniques of smell distribution, and we did that together with the Ulm crew, with the Ulm curators, and with some sample participants, visitors, who also evaluated the scents with us. Now, just very quickly, so if we are talking about scent diffusion techniques, then this A blotter is one of the techniques that we also used in the Rijksmuseum tours. It's a blotter. It's actually quite easy. If you have a smell or a scent in a perfume bottle, you can just put it on the blotter, and you can hand them around, and participants can sniff them. You can stack them, each scent together in a group in a different bag, and then hand them when you're standing in front of the artwork to your group. So they're quite easy to use. They're quite safe. The scent doesn't go really much further than this realm between the visitor and the nose. And also what people really like is that they can operate it themselves and sort of distance or get more in touch with the smell. But tour guides also struggle with it because it gives a lot of things to do. While also telling your story, you have to hand these out, and people want sometimes to give them back. So the tour guides also have to have some kind of disposal bag where they can put the used blotters in. So there is some training to this process. Another diffusion technique is to the hand fan, where you can also spray with the scent and then waft to the whole group. So then you have a technique to in one sort of movement have people smell around a whiff of the hand fan, which is also quite safe. It doesn't really, the scent doesn't travel very far in the room, but participants were a bit more critical about this, or they really liked it, but the sort of the downside of it is also that they have less control and they can't take the hand fan with them, and a lot of people do. They take their blotters home, and also start to compare different scents when the tours are building up. Always, when you're doing this, make sure that you take enough time, because smells make people talk. So you need to let that happen, right? Don't start to immediately explain what the smell is. Let them do the sniffing. Let them do the evaluation. Let them ask questions, and no, not questions like what do you think this smell is, but more associative questions. So hand fan, another way of smell diffusion that is quite useful in Heritage Institute is point by scent distribution, like these little wispies they are called, which you can pump and then smell. So this is also something that you can give around. It's also very useful for tours with children, for instance. They like to operate these wispies, and again you can then create your own smelling experience. It takes a bit longer to prepare. So this is what we're doing now. We're describing all those different distribution techniques and the pros and cons for it. And then maybe to rush to the, because I have a limited amount of time, to walk towards the last phase that we're developing, is how to then actually, if you have developed the sense and you've developed the tours, then how are you going to evaluate what you've done? Because again, there's a lot of expectation to what smell can bring, but there's not so much proof. And we think it might be advantageous for Heritage Institutes to be able to actually show that this is enhancing people's experiences. And here we're sort of learning over time. When we were doing the Rijksmuseum tours in 2018 and 2019, we started to design for the first time questionnaires that we also handed out to our participants during the tour. And this was a very small sample in the beginning. So we had 26 participants divided over 3 different tours, and we asked them questions around 4 categories maybe. Historical sensation, so questions as in, do you have the feeling that you're actually sort of thrown back into history and that you're part of the Battle of Waterloo? And so really feeling immersed in historical scene. The second questions were more about imagination. Can you now better imagine how this chair was made, or how Rembrandt worked in his atelier on this painting? So those are more imaginative questions. Then the third, I think it's really important. So knowledge. Many Heritage Institute highlight the fact that working with multisensory storytelling enhances experience. So there's a lot of talk and also claims about immersiveness, that you actually create a better wow to the collections. But what we find very interesting is, what do smells actually bring in terms of knowledge? Where do people gain knowledge, either about smelling itself, or about olfactory heritage, or about the collections in general, or about art in general? So what is it that you gain in terms of knowledge? And the fourth is more the affective response. Do people appreciate artworks and museum tours more when they are multisensory? Now, some of the findings, and again, this is a very small sample, so we can't say much about it, but in general, all the questionnaires and interviews that we did in this first, these pilot projects, always indicated that people highly appreciate the use of smell in tours and in exhibitions, and they also really appreciate that was something that we learned. They really appreciate the fact that they're learning by smelling, either because they become more attentive to the objects and to the artworks, and that they discover new things, or also because through the tour, of course, the tour guides give specific kinds of insights. So it's not only about the smelling, but it's also about the conversations that then happen around the artworks. What was interesting to see is also that either single scents, like the smell of petrol that we made people smell around a historical airplane, worked really, really well, because we were sort of easy to grasp, but immediately also imaginative. And smellscapes. So the Battle of Waterloo was really popular with all groups actually that we did. And again, these are just small samples. In the Europa project, now we're enhancing this evaluation process, really sort of taking all the steps slowly in order to create questionnaires, value questionnaires that are both insightful and also can create more robust results than we had in the pilot group. And in doing it, we're now sort of designing them, and also through focus group evaluating our questionnaires and making sure that we have the questionnaires that can actually measure these different values of olfactory museology techniques. So not only affect and recall, do people actually remember artworks and museums better if they are smelling, but also the learning aspects, and maybe also community shaping. So do smells help to think about identity, your individual identity, but also connectedness to others. This is where we are now for the for the tours, we have developed an evaluation model with different lines of questioning, both these skilled questions about people's experiences and reactions, and also what they bring in terms of previous ideas. So, for instance, we're also asking, have you joined a museum experience with smell before? So are these people completely new to the game or not? And also, if they, for instance, would like to take the sense home, and if they would be willing to invest more in olfactory tours than in others. So by ways of these questionnaires, we hope to capture and document better what it is that smells bring to the museum. And we would greatly appreciate it if you want to think with us, and we're really open for all kinds of questions and comments. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much, Inge and Sofia, for this very interesting contribution and opening up our nose to a completely new world. And we're really looking forward to see where the next steps will take you. And we have 11 sharp, and apparently we are about to go into the break, but there are some interesting questions in the chat, and I would like to at least go to one or two of them. One question is about, you talked about the Waterloo example, and I read out the contribution. I think the use of scents, and especially malodors, in the context of war exhibitions is highly interesting. I saw attempts featuring the smell of mustard gas of freshly brewed coffee and bacon in a trench scene. Overall, those smells connote positive aspects of war, or even tame the impact of war. And so the colleague is asking for you to maybe specify a little bit on your Waterloo example.
Yes, thank you so much for that wonderful question. Indeed, I was thinking about what is happening now in the Ukraine, and for so many people in the Netherlands, how far war is away, and how smells can help to sort of bring that reality also more directly to persons. The Battle of Waterloo smell consists of different components of painting that Pieneman painted, where we chose to work with partly reconstructed smell. Headspace technology captured smell of wars. And then leather, sweat, mud. It was a very rainy and a day. So the perfumers chose these components, and also the eau de cologne of Napoleon. You see in the far end of the corner of the painting Napoleon fleeing away. So it's both an evocative scene that sort of brings the reality of what a battlefield does, gunpowder, for instance, to the people, but also thinks about what the painting actually shows of this. And in our malodor workshop, we explore this more in detail. How can you actually work indeed with more challenging scents? And maybe Sofia can tell a bit more about that. I might maybe also, before I give the floor to Sofia, say something to the second question about reconstructions. Every reconstruction indeed is an interpretation. So there's no one layer of authenticity that you can reconstruct, and then even if you would have a reconstruction of a 17th century smell, you would bring it, for instance, on our modern bodies, that immediately would already take you away from a historical setting. So we would never say that we actually reconstruct the smell and then create an authentic experience for people. We always highlight that this is partly always an artistic creation and an interpretive mode. So, but maybe Sofia can also say something about how we are learning about how to work with malodors.
Yes. Thank you, Inger, for giving me the floor. I wanted to add something about the presentation methods as well that we learned with malodor. So Inger mentioned in the video that it was really important for the participants of our guided tours that they had some control over when they smelled malodors through the guided tour. And so we did one with the hand fan where our tour guide sort of waved this stench in people's faces, and they were sort of shocked by this, and they much preferred using the blotter in the sense to sort of give them some control. So something that came up in our malodor workshop as well was sort of this ethics of smelling, and how when you do smell, some interesting things can come up for people that you have to be very aware of and sensitive to. So perhaps someone's experience of a certain smell could not be a malodor as well, but this comes up more for bad smells, is that they can be impacted by this smell in a deep way, and one person could be impacted differently than the next. So that was something that came up in our workshop that was very interesting.
Thank you so much. I think this is a lot of food for thought, food for our noses, and I think we should continue this debate, this very interesting debate between authenticity, artistic reconstruction, and so forth, into the coffee break. There's a Wonder Me space where you can exchange and talk about it. And thank you very much again, Sofia and Inger, for your wonderful and extremely interesting and very important contribution. Thank you.